أهلا وسهلا. اليوم عندنا حرف صاد. صاد. تمام، فاكتبوا الصفحة هنا واسم الحرف صاد. صاد. تمام، ونكتب صاد. We usually transliterate this sound with a capital S with some underlines to emphasize it. فهذا الصوت doesn't exist in English. تمام, and you might be able to guess it's the Jinni version of a letter that we've already learned. Saad is the Jinni version of Sin, right? Because it's a similar sound but heavy. Remember, Jinni is a word we use to describe this, but it's also sometimes called a heavy sound letter, and that's a good descriptor for this sound. One thing I do want to note is not only is this a Jinni letter, so it affects the sounds of alif wa fatha like we've talked about, but the sound itself that you make with Saad is different than Sin. So when you make the sound of Sin, look at the way that my mouth is shaped and think about when you make that sound how your mouth is shaped. And then compare that to the sound of Saad, which is okay? The sound is made in a little bit of a different place in your mouth, and your lips are a different shape, right? For Saad versus for Sin. Okay, so just keep that in mind. وهذا الحرف social وجني, as we said, كما قلت. تمام. وفي البداية, I just wanted to point out that we have a couple of words right on this notes sheet that start with Saad. One of them is صفحة, right here, صفحة, وأيضا صوت. Okay, so you can hear that Jinni sound, صفحة وصوت, of the Saad in those two words. Okay, تمام. ففي البداية نعمل كذا, what, a small tooth, and then like this. So Saad in في البداية is a loop that is not a circle, right? It should be more of an oval or ideally a teardrop shape, right? Where it's more narrow on one side and wider on the other. And it sits on the line more or less. And then we make a little tooth up and go over to connect to the next letter. فمرة تانية كذا وكذا. تمام. The tooth is usually quite close to where the loop ends, but it doesn't have to be right on the end of the loop necessarily. تمام. ماشي. وفي النص نفس الشيء. It's really the same exact shape في النص, but with a tail on both sides because we're coming from a social letter. فمن حرف social كذا والtooth وكذا. تمام. مرة تانية كذا. ماشي. مرة واحدة كمان. تمام. This one's a little bit messy, but you get the idea. وفي النهاية مثل في النص, فنعمل كذا. And then when we do this little tooth, we're going to continue it downward, kind of like a noon in its end form, like this, okay? So a noon would have a dot there. Obviously, we're not going to put a dot for Saad. كذا. تمام. ماشي. ولوحده مثل في النهاية, but without the tail. كذا. تمام. ماشي. Okay. وشكل الحرف. So this one is pretty hard to come up with a mnemonic for. If you're feeling creative and you have an idea that works for you, maybe you could post it on Google Classroom to share with the class, or we could talk about it in class, because I have trouble coming up with a mnemonic for this one, but I'm going to show you one thing actually that's drawn out already because I don't feel confident in my ability to draw this. So here's one picture that I've seen for Saad where they have turned the Saad into a foot of a soccer player and a soccer ball, and the mnemonic is soccer is not sad, because sad looks kind of like, or sounds kind of like Saad. Okay, really it should be soccer is not Saad. So that's kind of a goofy one, but if that works for you, you can use it. If you come up with a better one, mumtaz. I don't love this one, but it works for some people. Okay. والكلمة الكلمة صباح صباح صباح. تمام صباح. And just to point out really quickly something about connecting this letter. So see, we have the tooth from Saad, and then there's the tooth from Ba, right? So you're going to end up often with two teeth in a row like that, if Saad is followed by another letter that has a tooth. تمام? Okay, شكرا. مع السلامة.